The stars disappeared behind 10,000 metal hulls. That was the first sign something was wrong. People on the night side of Earth looked up and saw familiar constellations vanish, replaced by moving lights that grew larger with each passing. Second, Admiral Jack Morrison had been sleeping in his quarters aboard the USS Defiance when the alarm started screaming. He rolled out of bed, pulled on his uniform, and ran to the bridge. The main screen showed what his tired brain couldn't process at first. Ships. Alien ships. More than anyone had ever seen in one place. How many? Jack asked his tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Sullivan. She was young, maybe 25, with steady hands that didn't shake even now. 9,900, sir, Amy said. Her voice stayed level, professional. They appeared at the edge of our system 20 minutes. Ego. They're moving in formation toward Earth. Jack had fought in skirmishes before. Pirates near Mars. Smugglers around the moon. But this was different. This was an invasion force that could crack Earth like an egg. The alien fleet belonged to the Krathon hegemony. Everyone knew about them. They had conquered 17-star systems in 30 years. They moved like locusts through space, taking what they wanted, enslaving populations, strip mining entire worlds. Earth's long-range scouts had been tracking their expansion, hoping they would pass by, hoping Earth was too small, too poor, too insignificant to notice. That hope died today. A message came through on all frequencies. The main screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. The Krathon commander had 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows, blue-gray skin that looked like leather, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He spoke in perfect English, having learned it from intercepted broadcasts. I am Zarthek the Inevitable, Supreme Commander of the Krathon hegemony's 3rd Conquest Fleet. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our empire. You have 1 planetary rotation to surrender. Lower your defenses. Power down your weapons. Submit to Krathon rule, and 40% of your population will be allowed to live as servants. Resist, and we will turn your cities to glass, boil your oceans, and take what few survivors remain as slaves. You have 24 hours. The transmission ended. The bridge crew stood frozen. Someone whispered a prayer. Another cursed. Jack turned to his communications officer. Get me President Hamilton now. Lisa Hamilton had been president for only 6 months. She was tough, smart, and had won the election by promising to strengthen Earth's defenses. Now she faced the test nobody wanted. She appeared on the screen from the underground bunker in Colorado, her face calm, but her eyes showing the weight of the moment. Admiral Morrison, I'm convening the Global Defense Council. I need options. Madam President, their fleet outnumbers ours 50-1. Our entire Space Force is 200 ships. They have nearly 10,000. By any conventional measure, we cannot win. General Paul Rogers joined the call from Beijing. He was old-school military, a veteran of 40 years. We should negotiate, buy time. Maybe they'll accept a tribute, leave us autonomous if we pay them enough. They said 40% would live as servants, the president reminded him. That means they plan to kill 4.5 billion people even if we surrender. Dr. Karen White's face appeared in another window. She ran the Advanced Weapons Division, a secret program hidden in the asteroid belt. She was small, quiet, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without noticing, but her brain had designed weapons that could crack moons. Madam President, Karen said, they don't know about Project Lighthouse. Jack leaned forward. He'd heard rumors about Lighthouse, black budget stuff, technology so classified that even he with his admiral's stars didn't have clearance. Explain, the president said. For the past decade, we've been building hidden weapons throughout the solar system. The mining stations in the asteroid belt aren't just mining stations. Every commercial satellite has a surprise inside. We've turned our entire infrastructure into a weapon system, but we've kept it hidden, made everything look civilian, primitive. The Krathon think we're a level 2 civilization. We're actually approaching level 3. Can we win? The president asked directly. Karen paused. We can make them bleed. How much depends on how far we're willing to go. The president stood up. Behind her, Jack could see military advisors and cabinet members gathering. How far? Doctor, if those aliens set foot on Earth, they'll slaughter billions. I'm willing to go as far as it takes. The meeting continued for 3 hours. Plans were made, orders were given. Around the world, hidden systems came online, weapons that had been disguised. As communication arrays powered up, mining lasers recalibrated for new targets. Soldiers kissed their families goodbye and reported to stations they'd trained for but hoped never to use. Meanwhile, ordinary people reacted in their own ways. In New York, crowds gathered in Times Square, watching the news on giant screens. In Tokyo, families went to temples to pray. In London, pubs filled with people who wanted to face the end with a pint in hand. Children asked their parents why the sky looked different. Parents lied and said everything would be fine, but not everyone panicked. In a garage in California, a teenager named Kevin Lee started working on something with his computer. In Moscow, retired soldiers dusted off old uniforms and reported to recruitment centers. In Sydney, a group of engineers looked at the city's power grid and began to imagine how it might become a weapon. The Krathon fleet hung in space like a storm cloud. On their flagship, Zarthek studied the blue-green world below. Such a pretty planet. Good water. Decent minerals. The population was numerous enough to provide slaves for decades. Their technology was laughable. Nuclear weapons, chemical rockets, some basic energy weapons. Nothing that could threaten modern Krathon shields. His second-in-command, Veltor, approached with a report. The humans are mobilizing their forces. 200 ships are forming defensive positions around their planet. Zarthek's 6 eyes blinked, in sequence a sign of amusement. 200 against 10,000. These humans are either brave or stupid. Perhaps both, Veltor suggested. Send a probe squadron to test their defenses. 50 ships. Let them waste their ammunition. Show them how pointless resistance is. But down on Earth, as the 24-hour deadline ticked away, something unprecedented was happening. Every government on the planet had agreed on something for the first time in human history. Every military shared their secrets. Every scientist contributed their knowledge. Every able-bodied person volunteered to help. President. Hamilton went on global broadcast with 3 hours left on the alien deadline. She stood at a podium, flags of all Earth's nations behind her. Her words were simple. People of Earth. The aliens expect us to surrender. They expect us to bow down and accept slavery or death. They think we're weak because we're divided. They think we're primitive because we haven't conquered other worlds. They're wrong. Today we're not Americans or Chinese or Russians or Europeans. Today, we're humans. And today, we fight. The broadcast shifted to Admiral Morrison on the bridge of the Defiance. Behind him, Earth's meager fleet formed up in defensive lines. This is Admiral Morrison to the Krathon fleet. We've considered your terms. He paused, knowing every human on Earth was watching, knowing history would remember these words. Come and take it. The message was transmitted on every frequency, in every language Earth knew, and even in the Krathon's own tongue. It was humanity's answer. Not surrender, not negotiation, just 4 words that would echo through history. On the Krathon flagship, Zarthek's eyes went wide. In 17 conquered systems, no one had ever responded like this. They begged. They negotiated. They surrendered. They ran. But they never, ever invited attack when outnumbered 50-1. All ships, he commanded. Prepare for battle. These humans want to die as warriors. We'll oblige them. But as the first wave of Krathon ships began their approach, something was different about Earth. The planet itself seemed to pulse with energy. Hidden systems activated. Dormant weapons came online. In the asteroid belt, mining stations stopped pretending to be mining stations. Humanity had made its choice. The first wave of Krathon ships moved forward like predators stalking prey. 900 vessels, each one larger than a city block, advanced toward Earth in perfect formation. Their hulls gleamed purple and silver in the sunlight, energy shields shimmering around them like soap bubbles. These ships had conquered worlds. They had never lost a battle. Captain Ryan Foster sat in the command chair of Mining Station 7, floating in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. To anyone watching, it looked like a normal mining operation. Ore processors, living quarters, storage tanks. But Ryan and his crew of 30 hadn't mined a single rock in 2 years. They'd been waiting for this day. Enemy ships entering optimal, range in 60 seconds, his weapons officer, Lieutenant Brad Coleman, reported. Brad was a farm boy from Iowa who'd joined up to see space. Now he controlled weapons that could vaporize mountains. Ryan activated the encrypted channel connecting all the hidden defense stations. All lighthouse stations, this is Station 7. Prepare to drop the mask on my signal. Let's show these bastards what humans can do. The Krathon ships passed through the asteroid belt without concern. Their scanners showed mining operations, exactly what they expected from a primitive civilization. They didn't notice that every mining laser was tracking them. They didn't realize that the harmless-looking ore processors were hiding focusing crystals that could amplify a laser beam to stellar intensities. Now, Ryan said quietly. Across the asteroid belt, 43 mining stations revealed their true nature. Mining lasers designed to cut through solid rock suddenly blazed with power that shouldn't have been possible. The beams were invisible in the vacuum of space, but their effect was immediate and devastating. The lead Krathon cruiser simply disappeared. One moment it was there, 800 meters of advanced alien warship. The next, it was expanding gas and molten metal. The beam had heated its hull to millions of degrees in less than a second. Before the Krathons could react, 30 more ships were gone. Their shields, designed to deflect plasma and kinetic weapons, offered no protection against beams that delivered the energy output of a small star. The perfect formation collapsed as ships tried to evade, but the lasers tracked them with computer precision. Sub-Commander Veltor watched his tactical display in horror. Impossible. Their technology level doesn't support weapons of this magnitude. Zarthek studied the data flowing across his screens. They hid it. They've been hiding their true capabilities. A mixture of rage and respect colored his thoughts. Return fire. Destroy those stations. The Krathon ships fired back with plasma cannons that could melt cities. But the mining stations were built into asteroids, protected by millions of tons of rock. The plasma splashed harmlessly against stone that had survived billions of years in space. Meanwhile, closer to Earth, Colonel Sam Brooks watched the enemy fleet from his command center beneath Chicago. He commanded Earth's satellite defense network, thousands of civilian satellites that nobody suspected were weapons. Activate swarm protocol, he ordered. Around Earth, communication satellites that had beamed television signals and phone calls for decades opened hidden compartments. Inside each one was a single antimatter warhead, no bigger than a baseball. Earth had been manufacturing antimatter in secret for 20 years, storing it in magnetic bottles throughout the orbital infrastructure. The first Krathon squadron to reach Earth's orbit flew directly into the trap. A weather satellite that had predicted rain and sunshine for 50 years suddenly accelerated toward the nearest enemy ship. The Krathons barely noticed it, a piece of primitive space junk. Then it detonated. Antimatter met matter, and Einstein's equation played out in its most violent form. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a new sun that lasted 3 seconds. When it faded, the Krathon destroyer and everything within a kilometer was gone. More satellites began their suicide runs. The Krathons tried to shoot them down, but there were thousands. For every one they destroyed, 3 more changed course toward their ships. Earth's orbit became a minefield of moving bombs. On Earth's surface, Danny Chen sat in a concrete bunker in Nevada, his hands on the controls of a railgun that stretched for 2 miles underground. The weapon used electromagnetic acceleration to fire simple tungsten rods at speeds approaching light itself. Target locked, Danny said to his commander. Ready to fire. Light them up, Private. The railgun fired with a sound like thunder. The tungsten rod, no bigger than a telephone pole, accelerated to 90% the speed of light in less than 3 seconds. It punched through Earth's atmosphere in a trail of fire and struck a Krathon battleship. The kinetic energy was enormous, The rod didn't explode. It simply transferred its energy into the ship's hull. The battleship cracked in half like an egg, its two halves spinning away in different directions. All across Earth, hidden railguns fired. From the Sahara Desert, from Siberia, from the ocean floors where secret bases had been built. Tungsten. Rods flew at relativistic speeds, turning the space around Earth into a shooting gallery. But the Krathons weren't helpless. They adapted quickly, spreading their formation, randomizing their movements. They began firing at Earth itself, plasma beams reaching down towards cities. That's when Earth played another card. In New York, buildings that had stood for a century revealed their secrets. Panels slid away from skyscrapers, revealing weapon systems built into the architecture itself. The Empire State Building's spire split open, and a massive energy cannon emerged. It fired a beam that pierced through a Krathon frigate's shields and cored it like an apple. In Tokyo, the entire city's power grid redirected into a single massive, electromagnetic pulse that washed over the enemy fleet. 40 Krathon ships found their electronics scrambled, their engines dead, drifting helpless in space. Betty Cooper, a 70-year-old engineer in London, sat at a control panel that hadn't existed 12 hours ago. She'd helped design London's power grid 40 years ago. Now she was using it as a weapon. "Let's see how they like this," she muttered, throwing a switch that sent every watt of power in London into a focused energy beam that reached into space. The human resistance wasn't just military. In Moscow, a group of hackers led by a woman named Natasha Volkov had been working on something special. They'd studied the captured Krathon probe, learned their computer language, understood their network protocols. "We're in," Natasha announced to her team. "Uploading the virus now." The virus wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to confuse. Suddenly, Krathon ships received conflicting orders. Navigation systems showed enemies where allies were. Communication channels filled with noise. The perfect coordination that made the Krathon fleet so dangerous began to fracture. Squadron leader Julie Park led her wing of 20 fighters toward the enemy fleet. The fighters were old, practically antiques, but they'd been modified with something special. Each one carried a bottle of compressed dark matter, recovered from a crashed UFO that the government had hidden for decades. "Remember," Julie told her pilots, "we need to get close. Their sensors can't track us at maximum speed. It's going to be rough." The fighters accelerated beyond what human bodies should survive. The pilots gritted their teeth against the G-forces, blood vessels bursting in their eyes, but they kept going. They flew between the massive Krathon ships like mosquitoes among elephants. Julie released her payload against a Krathon dreadnought's engine core. The dark matter reacted with the ship's power source, creating a cascade reaction that spread through the vessel. The dreadnought imploded, collapsing into a point of infinite density before exploding outward in a wave of exotic particles. Not all the human defenders survived. Railgun positions were found and destroyed. Satellites were shot down by the hundreds. Entire fighter squadrons were vaporized. But for every human position destroyed, the Krathons paid in ships. The battle had been raging for 3 hours when Zarthek realized the truth. His first wave of 900 ships was down to less than 400. The humans had destroyed more Krathon vessels in 3 hours than had been lost in the last 5 conquests combined. "This is impossible," Veltor said, his voice shaking. "They're primitives. They use chemical rockets and nuclear fission. How are they doing this?" Zartek's 6 eyes focused on the blue planet below. "They're not primitive. They've been pretending, hiding their strength, waiting." He felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. On Earth, Admiral Morrison coordinated the defense from his ship. The bridge was filled with smoke from overloaded systems, and half his crew was wounded, but they kept fighting. "Sir," Amy Sullivan reported, "the first wave is pulling back. We've destroyed over 500 enemy ships." Jack allowed himself a moment of hope, but he knew this was just the beginning. "They still have 9,000 more. Prepare for the second wave." In the asteroid belt, Ryan Foster surveyed the damage to his station. They'd taken hits, lost 10 good people, but their main weapon was still functional. Reload the focusing crystals, he ordered. They'll be back. The Krathon fleet regrouped, analyzing what had happened. They'd expected an easy victory against a primitive world. Instead, they'd found a species that had turned deception into an art form and their entire solar system into a weapon. Zarthek made his decision. All ships, prepare for total assault. 9,000 alien warships moved toward Earth like a metallic tsunami. The space between Mars and Earth filled with purple hull plating and charging weapons. Any rational species would have surrendered at this site, but humans had never been accused of being rational. Dr. Nina Rodriguez sat in an underground bunker beneath Mexico City, surrounded by screens showing brain scans and behavioral patterns. She was Earth's leading xenopsychologist, and she'd spent 3 years studying every piece of data about the Krathons. Now she was about to weaponize that knowledge. The Krathons share a hive mind, she explained to her team of neuroscientists and programmers. They're all connected all the time. It's their strength, but it's also their weakness. They've never experienced true individual fear. They don't know what it's like to be alone in their own head while facing death. Her assistant, Dr. James, Lou looked up from his computer. The information virus is ready, but how do we deliver it? Nina smiled grimly. Every communication they send, every order they transmit creates a two-way connection. We just need to piggyback on their own signals. Above Earth's atmosphere, Commander Julie Park regrouped her surviving fighters. Only 12 of her original, 20 remained. Their dark matter weapons were gone, used in the first wave. But humans were nothing if not adaptable. Listen up, she told her pilots. We're going with Plan B. And if you're wondering, yes, Plan B is completely insane. Plan B involved flying cargo shuttles, normally used to ferry supplies to the moon directly at enemy ships. The shuttles were packed with mining explosives, nuclear warheads, and tanks of compressed hydrogen. Flying bombs with human pilots. Can't use autopilot, Julie explained. Their point defense will track predictable flight paths. We need human randomness, human crazy. Who's with me? Every surviving pilot volunteered. On the ground, the civilian population had mobilized in ways the Krathons couldn't have predicted. In California, Kevin Lee, the teenager who'd been working in his garage, had finished his project. He'd built a quantum computer from parts ordered online and stolen from his school's lab. Now he was using it to hack Krathon ships. I'm in their navigation system, Kevin told his online friends who were helping from around the world. Making them think up is down, left is right. A Krathon destroyer suddenly veered into its sister ship. Both vessels crumpled from the impact, their shields useless against their own momentum. In Detroit, the abandoned factories that had once built cars were building something else. Workers who'd been laid off years ago had returned, volunteering to build weapons. They worked 20-hour shifts, sleeping on the factory floors, eating while they welded and assembled. Frank Miller, a 60-year-old former auto worker, supervised the construction of kinetic missiles. My grandfather built tanks to fight Nazis, he told his crew. Now we're building rockets to fight aliens. Different war, same spirit. The weapons they built were crude but effective. Rockets made from steel pipes guided by smartphones, carrying warheads made from mining explosives. Not sophisticated, but when fired by the thousands, they created a cloud of death that even advanced shields couldn't completely stop. Meanwhile, Betty Cooper in London had connected with engineers around the world. They were turning Earth's entire power infrastructure into a weapon. Power plants from China to Chile synchronized their output, creating coordinated energy bursts that reached into space. On my mark, Betty said over the encrypted channel. 3, 2, 1, mark. Every power plant on Earth's night side channeled, its energy through satellite dishes, radio towers, even cell phone antennas. The combined beam struck the Krathon fleet's center, overloading shields on 100 ships simultaneously. The Krathons responded with devastating firepower. Plasma beams rained down on Earth. Paris lost the Eiffel Tower. Beijing saw the Forbidden City turn to glass. Rio watched Christ the Redeemer melt. But for every monument destroyed, humans found new ways to fight back. In orbit, Marine Captain Steve Walker led the most audacious mission yet. His team of 200 Marines had launched in stealth pods drifting among the debris of destroyed ships. Their target? Boarding enemy vessels. "Remember," Steve told his Marines, "we're not trying to capture these ships. We're leaving presence." The Marines used magnetic grapples to attach to Krathon hulls, then cut their way inside with plasma torches. The aliens they encountered were physically superior, stronger, and faster, but humans had one advantage. They were used to fighting dirty. Private Maria Gonzalez threw sand from Earth into a Krathon warrior's 6 eyes, then hit it with a crowbar. Sergeant Mike Taylor used a fire extinguisher to create a cloud of fog, then attacked from behind. The Marines fought with guns, knives, improvised clubs, and when those ran out, with fists and teeth. They left behind nuclear bombs with timer detonators set to explode after the Marines escaped, but not all of them made it out. Steve Walker's last transmission was simple. "Tell my kids I love them. Detonating now." 20 Krathon ships exploded from within, nuclear fire bursting from their hulls. Nina Rodriguez's psychological weapon was ready. Using communication arrays around the world, her team transmitted the information virus disguised as random noise. The Krathon's hive mind, always hungry for data, absorbed it without question. The effect was immediate and terrifying. For the first time in their species' history, Krathon soldiers felt alone. The comforting presence of the collective mind vanished, replaced by individual consciousness and the fear that came with it. On the Krathon flagship, Zarthek watched his tactical display in horror. Ships were firing on each other. Formations were collapsing. Pilots were screaming about voices in their heads, about being alone, about the darkness between thoughts. "What's happening?" Veltor demanded, his 6 eyes wide with panic. "The humans," Zarthek realized. "They've poisoned our mind link." The chaos spread through the fleet. Krathon soldiers who had never made an individual decision suddenly had to think for themselves. The result was panic. Ships collided, weapons fired randomly. The perfect military machine became a mob. Julie Park saw the opportunity. "All fighters, attack now while they're confused." Her 12 remaining pilots dove into the chaos. They fired their makeshift weapons, ramming smaller Krathon ships, causing as much damage as possible. Julie's own fighter was hit, spinning out of control, but she managed to crash it into a Krathon cruiser's bridge, taking the enemy vessel with her. On Earth, the resistance had become universal. Children helped load ammunition. Elderly people manned communication stations. In hospitals, doctors treated wounded soldiers while explosions shook the buildings. Everyone who could hold a weapon or press a button was fighting. In Tokyo, a group of artists had turned their gallery into a weapons lab. They used 3D printers to create shaped charges, turning sculptures into bombs. "Art is supposed to make a statement," one said while painting explosive chemicals onto a canvas. "This is our statement." The Krathons tried to re-establish their hive mind, but Nina's virus had evolved, spreading through their network faster than they could purge it. Individual Krathons began to desert, their ships fleeing in random directions. Admiral Morrison watched from the bridge of the Defiance as humanity's insane defense actually began to work. The Krathon fleet, which had arrived in perfect order, was now in complete chaos. Thousands of ships remained, but they were no longer a coordinated force. "Sir?" Amy Sullivan reported, her uniform torn and bloodied but her voice steady. "We've disabled or destroyed over 3,000 enemy vessels, but we've lost 60% of our defense platforms. We can't keep this up much longer." Jack nodded. They'd bloodied the enemy's nose, but the Krathons still had superior numbers. "Prepare Operation Trojan Horse. If we're going down, we're taking them with us." Around the world, humans prepared for what might be their last stand. They'd shown the galaxy that Earth wouldn't go quietly. They'd turned their planet into a fortress, their civilians into soldiers, their very minds into weapons. The battle for Earth was far from over, but humanity had proven one thing. They might be outnumbered, they might be outgunned, but they would never be outfought. Because humans had something the Krathons didn't understand, the ability to stare death in the face and spit in its eye. The Krathon fleet regrouped, trying to restore order, but the damage was done. The perfect invasion had become a chaotic brawl and humans thrived in chaos. Zarthek stood on his flagship's bridge watching his mighty armada dissolve into chaos. 7,000 ships remained from his original 10,000, but they were scattered, confused, fighting each other as much as the humans. His 6 eyes burned with rage and something else he'd never felt before. Doubt. Restore the mind link, he commanded his technology officers. Purge the human virus. We're trying, Supreme Commander, one replied, terror in his voice. But it adapts. Every time we block it, it finds a new way in. Below on Earth, Admiral Morrison initiated humanity's most desperate gamble. Operation Trojan Horse was about to begin. The hundreds of Krathon ships that Earth forces had disabled but not destroyed were floating in space, seemingly harmless, derelicts. The Krathons had started recovering them, towing them back to their support vessels for repair and crew rescue. They had no idea that Marine teams had left nuclear weapons aboard each one, all connected to a single trigger that Morrison held in his hand. Wait for it, he told his bridge crew. We need more of them to take the bait. General Ashley Turner coordinated the ground defense from her bunker beneath Washington. Half the city above her was gone, turned to molten glass by Krathon plasma. Bombardment. But Washington was fighting back with weapons nobody knew existed. Activate the monument defense system, she ordered. The Lincoln Memorial's marble columns split apart, revealing railguns built into the structure itself. The Washington monument's top opened like a flower, and an energy weapon emerged that had been hidden inside for 20 years. Even the Smithsonian museums had weapons hidden in their basements, turning America's cultural treasures into fortresses. The same scene played out across the world. The Great Wall of China revealed hidden missile silos every 100 meters. The pyramids of Egypt opened to show energy cannons that had been secretly installed decades ago. Big Ben in London was actually a massive electromagnetic pulse generator. Humanity had turned its history into weapons. In space, the battle took another turn. The Krathons, trying to reorganize, had pulled their damaged ships into tight formations for mutual protection. 50 disabled vessels were now docked with repair ships and carriers. Hundreds more were being towed into position. Now, Morrison said, pressing the trigger. The nuclear weapons detonated simultaneously. Not massive explosions, but shaped charges, designed to cut through ship hulls and destroy internal systems. 50 Krathon vessels, including 2 of their largest carriers, were gutted from the inside. The explosions created a chain reaction, damaged ships crashing into healthy ones, creating more destruction. Veltor screamed as his tactical display showed another 1,000 ships damaged or destroyed in seconds. They booby-trapped our own vessels. They used our rescue efforts against us. Zarthek's composure finally cracked. Burn their planet. All weapons. Target Earth. Leave nothing alive. The remaining Krathon fleet turned their weapons on Earth itself. Thousands of plasma beams and kinetic weapons rained down. Oceans boiled. Mountains melted. Cities that had stood for centuries vanished in seconds. But Earth had one more secret. Dr. Karen White activated Project Lighthouse's final protocol from her bunker in Colorado. Initiating Pandora sequence, she announced. Hidden satellites that had remained dormant throughout the battle suddenly came alive. These weren't weapons. They were something far more dangerous. They were hyperspace disruptors, devices that could destabilize the very fabric of space-time. The Krathons want to glass our planet? Karen said grimly. Let's see them try it while their ships are being torn apart by gravity itself. The satellites activated, creating pockets of warped space throughout the Krathon fleet. Ships found themselves stretched like rubber, their hulls groaning and cracking. Others were compressed, their internal spaces shrinking until crew members were crushed against the walls. But the most devastating effect was on ships trying to escape. As Krathon vessels attempted to open hyperspace windows for retreat, the distorted spacetime caused the windows to collapse, creating miniature black holes that consumed the ships trying to flee. Meanwhile, Humanity's survivors fought with desperate fury. In Moscow, civilians had turned the subway system into a massive railgun, using the tunnels to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. In Sydney, the Opera House revealed itself to be a massive sonic weapon, using sound waves that could shatter Krathon hull plating. Pilot Jason Miller had one job: deliver humanity's final message to the Krathon flagship. His cargo hauler was loaded with 20 nuclear warheads and something else, a transmitter containing every piece of human culture. Music, art, literature, the sum total of human achievement and emotion. If we're going to die, he said to himself, weaving between plasma beams, they're going to know who they killed. Jason's ship was hit multiple times, systems failing, life support gone. He flew by instinct, his vision blurring from lack of oxygen. With his last conscious act, he rammed the flagship's hull and detonated his payload. The nuclear explosions crippled the flagship's engines, but more importantly, the cultural transmission flooded into the Krathon hive mind through their damaged systems. Suddenly, every connected Krathon experienced human emotion: joy, sorrow, love, hate, fear, courage, all at once, overwhelming their collective consciousness. Krathon soldiers dropped their weapons, overwhelmed by feelings they'd never experienced. Pilots forgot how to fly as human music filled their minds. The coordinated military machine became individuals, each struggling to process the tsunami of human experience. Katie Anderson, the programmer who'd been coordinating the cyber attacks, saw an opportunity. They're vulnerable. Hit them with everything. Every hacker on Earth launched simultaneous attacks. They overloaded Krathon systems with data, inserted viruses that made ships dance to human music, replaced tactical displays with human art. One Krathon destroyer found all its screens showing cat videos. Another had its navigation system replaced with a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. It should have been ridiculous. It was ridiculous. But it worked. The Krathons, already struggling with individual consciousness and human emotions, couldn't handle the chaos. Ships spun in circles, weapons fired randomly. Some vessels simply shut down, their crews paralyzed by the overwhelming input. General Turner saw the moment. All ground forces, maximum firepower, everything we have left, every weapon on Earth, fired at once. Railguns, energy weapons, missiles, even conventional artillery. The sky lit up with ascending death. Earth itself seemed to reach up with burning fingers to drag the invaders down. The combination of attacks, physical, psychological, and electronic, finally broke the Krathon fleet. Ships began to flee in every direction, no longer caring about formation or orders. The mighty armada had become a rout. Zarthek, his flagship crippled and his mind reeling from human emotions he couldn't process, gave the only order he could. Retreat. All ships, retreat immediately. But the hyperspace disruptors were still active. Ships trying to escape were torn apart by collapsing space-time. Others collided in their panic. The organized withdrawal became a desperate scramble for survival. Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Krathon fleet was destroying itself in its attempt to escape. But Earth had paid a terrible price. Billions were dead. Cities were gone. The planet's surface was scarred with glass craters and radioactive ruins. "Sir," Amy Sullivan said quietly. "They're running." "Let them run," Morrison replied. "But make sure they remember why." The pursuit squadrons launched. Humanity's fastest, ships armed with antimatter torpedoes. They chased the fleeing Krathons, picking off stragglers, ensuring that the aliens understood that Earth wasn't just defending, it was teaching a lesson. Lieutenant Commander Tony Martinez led the pursuit. His squadron of 30 ships had been held in reserve, hidden behind the moon. Now they emerged like wolves hunting the scattered Krathon forces. "No mercy," he told his pilots. "They wanted to enslave our children. Make sure they never forget what happens when you threaten Earth." The pursuit was relentless. Human ships, smaller and faster, darted among the fleeing Krathons, launching torpedoes that turned enemy vessels into expanding clouds of atoms. They targeted engines, leaving ships drifting helplessly. They destroyed communication arrays, ensuring the fleeing aliens couldn't coordinate. On his crippled flagship, Zarthek watched his empire's greatest fleet reduced to a few hundred fleeing vessels. In 12 hours, humans had destroyed over 9,000 ships. They had shattered the Krathon hive mind, introduced concepts that would haunt his species for generations, and proven that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one with nothing left to lose. Supreme Commander, Veltor said, his voice broken. We must record this. Others must know. Zarthek nodded slowly. His 6 eyes, once bright with confidence, were now dim with trauma. Yes, they must know about the humans. They must know to never, ever come here. As the remnants of the Krathon fleet limped toward the edge of the solar system, Earth's defenders finally allowed themselves to breathe. They had done the impossible. They had won. 73 ships. That was all that remained of the mighty Krathon invasion fleet. They limped through space toward the hyperspace jump point, damaged, traumatized, carrying survivors who would never be the same. Behind them, Earth's pursuit. Squadrons kept pace, making sure they left, ready to finish the job if they turned back. Zarthek sat alone in his command chair, his 6 eyes staring at nothing. The bridge around him was dark, most systems offline, his crew silent. The Supreme Commander, who had conquered 17 systems, who had been called the Inevitable, was broken. In his mind, human music still played. Human emotions still echoed. The individual consciousness that the humans had forced upon him remained, a permanent scar on his psyche. Supreme Commander, Veltor approached carefully. We're approaching the jump point. The humans are still following. Let them follow, Zarthek said quietly. Let them see us run. It's important that they know they've won completely. On Earth, the scale of destruction was becoming clear. Cities lay in ruins. 3 billion people were dead. The Pacific Ocean had lost 10% of its water to boiling. Antarctica had melted, flooding coastlines worldwide. But humanity had survived. And more importantly, they had won. President Lisa Hamilton stood in what remained of the White House. Half the building gone, the other half melted and twisted. She was broadcasting to the world from the ruins, her face covered in ash and blood, but her voice strong. We have paid a terrible price, she said. We have lost billions of our brothers and sisters. Our world is scarred. But we are still here. We are still free. And the galaxy now knows that Earth is not a victim. Earth is a guardian that will bite off the hand of anyone who tries to chain it. Admiral Morrison coordinated the final phase of the operation from his damaged bridge. The Defiance had taken 17 direct hits but was still flying, held together by emergency patches and human stubbornness. Tony, he called to Lieutenant Commander Martinez, make sure they get the message. Tony's squadron had prepared something special. As the Krathon ships approached the jump point, the human vessels launched one final volley. Not weapons this time, but probes. Each probe attached to a Krathon hull and began transmitting on all frequencies, ensuring that when these ships returned home, they would carry Earth's message to the entire galaxy. The message was simple, broadcast in every language Earth knew, and several they had learned from captured Krathon databases. This is Earth. We are humanity. We desire peace, but we excel at war. We wish to be friends, but we can be nightmares. Choose wisely. Along with the message went footage of the battle, the destruction of 9,000 ships, the transformation of Earth into a weapon, the sight of humans fighting with everything from advanced energy weapons to rocks and bare hands. It was a warning and a promise. As the Krathon ships began their jump to hyperspace, Zarthek recorded his final report for the hegemony. He stood before the recorder, his once proud uniform torn and stained, his eyes dim but focused. I am Zarthek, Supreme Commander of the 3rd Conquest Fleet. I took 10,000 ships to conquer Earth. I return with 73. Do not go to Earth. Do not threaten Earth. Do not even think of Earth as an enemy. The humans are not like us. They are not like anyone. He paused, struggling to find words for what he had experienced. They turned their entire planet into a weapon in hours. They used their own culture as a virus to destroy our minds. They fight without logic, without self-preservation, with a fury that defies understanding. They hid their true strength, pretending to be primitive while building weapons in plain sight. They are chaos incarnate, and that chaos is their strength. They infected us with individuality, with emotions we cannot purge. Every survivor of this fleet will carry human thoughts for the rest of their lives. We will hear their music in our dreams. We will feel their emotions in our meditation. They have changed us permanently. Mark Earth as forbidden. Any ship that enters their system will not return. Any fleet that threatens them will be destroyed. They gave us mercy by letting these few ships escape, but only so we could carry this warning. Do not test them again. The recording ended. The mine. Krathon ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving the solar system behind. But they would never truly escape. The human virus in their minds, the individual consciousness that had been forced upon them, would spread through the hegemony. Within a generation, the rigid hive mind would fragment, their empire collapsing from within. Humanity had won not just a battle, but a war that would echo through time. 6 months later, Ambassador Maria Torres stood before the Galactic Council, a gathering of 43 spacefaring civilizations. She was humanity's first representative to this body, invited after news of Earth's victory had spread through diplomatic channels. The council chamber was vast, filled with beings of every imaginable form, crystalline entities that sang their words, gas-based life forms that floated in special containers, silicon creatures that moved like living rock. And all of them were silent, watching the small human woman who represented the species that had done the impossible. Honored representatives, Maria began, her voice carrying through the chamber. Humanity comes before you not as conquerors but as neighbors. We did not seek the war with the Krathons. We did not want the death and destruction that followed. But we will not apologize for defending our home. She paused, looking around the chamber. We know many of you fear us now. You've heard the stories. The planet that fought back. The species that turned madness into strategy. The primitives who destroyed the mighty Krathon fleet. These stories are true, but they are not the whole truth. The truth is that humans are capable of terrible violence when threatened. We can turn anything into a weapon. We will fight with our last breath and beyond. But we would rather not fight at all. We would rather trade, learn, share, and grow together. We offer our hand in friendship to any who will take it. But those who come with a fist will find that hand can close into one as well. The council remained silent for a long moment. Then, the eldest member, a being of pure energy known as the Illuminated, spoke. The humans have earned their place, through blood and courage. They have proven that technological superiority does not guarantee victory. They have shown that the will to survive can overcome any odds. Earth is recognized as a sovereign world, and humanity as a protected species, under council law. The chamber erupted in various forms of applause, sonic vibrations, color changes, chemical releases. Earth was officially part of the galactic community, but more importantly, it was respected and feared. On Earth, reconstruction had begun. Cities were being rebuilt, but now with hidden defenses built into every structure. The mining stations in the asteroid belt remained weapons, just pretending to be mines. Every satellite launched carried a small surprise, just in case. Children grew up hearing stories of the day Earth fought back. They learned in school how their parents and grandparents had turned household items into weapons, how teenagers had hacked alien warships, how Grandmother Betty in London had turned the power grid into a giant laser. Memorial walls were built in every surviving city, but they didn't list names. There were too many dead for that. Instead, they all carried the same inscription. They sent 9,900 ships to conquer Earth. Only a few survived to tell the tale. In a bar in Montana, Admiral Jack Morrison, now retired, sat with other veterans. They didn't talk about the battle much. They didn't need to. They just drank their beers, and occasionally someone would raise a toast. To the crazy. To the crazy, the others would respond. because that's what had saved Earth. Not superior technology, not military might, but the human capacity for absolute, unhinged determination when backed into a corner, the willingness to turn everything into a weapon, the ability to look at impossible odds and say, let's see what happens. Years passed. The story of Earth's defense spread through the galaxy, growing with each telling. Some versions had humans eating Krathon ships. Others claimed humans had sung their enemies to death. The truth was strange enough, but the legend grew stranger. Trade ships began visiting Earth, their crews nervous but curious about the insane humans. They found a species that was surprisingly welcoming, eager to make friends, happy to share their food and culture. But every visitor noticed the same thing. Even the most peaceful human had a look in their eyes that said, I could kill you with that coffee mug if I had to. The Krathon hegemony never recovered. The survivors of the Earth expedition spread their infection of individuality throughout their society. Within 20 years, the hive mind had fragmented completely. The empire split into dozens of smaller nations, each developing its own culture. Some historians would later argue that humanity had freed the Krathons from themselves, though few Krathons saw it that way. One young Krathon scholar, studying the battle decades later, asked his mentor, a survivor of the invasion, how did they win? Every tactical analysis says it was impossible. The old Krathon closed all 6 of his eyes and shuddered. That's exactly why they won. They knew it was impossible, so they changed the rules. They made the impossible possible through pure, concentrated insanity. Never forget the lesson of Earth. In a universe of order and logic, chaos is the ultimate weapon.